Or you don't have anything? Okay, perfect.
Just talk through it, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, makes it easy. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to get started with lightning talks. We have a few talks here, and we're going to just fly through them. So first up is David talking about Wagtail and sustainability at a library. Take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me? So I work for a large academic library, and I was told that we are one of the longer running Wagtail sites. That we also like the earlier presenters have run it for about 8 years now. So this talk is not really a specific how-to or cool thing, but more just reflections on what has been our experience, what has been the value of using Wagtail for us over that time. I'm also not a developer, I'm a librarian, but I do the web management for the organization. So that's the perspective I'm speaking from. And we have a small development team at the library. We have a designer, a developer, and sometimes a UX person. And a lot of my job is working on thinking about the sustainability of the applications that we're running. We have a fairly complex and large website. We have to support many different user flows and use cases within our sites. So I was going to talk about some of those use cases, but I'm going to insert an anecdote here that I think is marginally relevant. And I couldn't resist this after hearing the talk from the consumer protection folks about raw HTML and then the validation talk. So an example of a task or an issue we dealt with once, I got a ticket submitted from one of our catalogers that a particular page for a book in our catalog was throwing an error consistently. And I went to this page and saw a JavaScript warning saying median group of bitnik with an exclamation point. And I looked at the book, and it turned out the title was actually, the title of the book was left angle bracket script, right angle bracket alert. And this was a published work. So it turned out that this book had been created by a Serbian and German digital art collective. And they included functioning JavaScript in the book title, which we sanitized in many cases, but not in this particular case. So despite this being relatively benign code, we made sure after that to always, escape, HTML, if it was in the title field of the book. I later checked how Amazon displayed this book title, and I saw that they had deleted the angle brackets entirely from the title. Cowards, yeah. So we maintain a number of different applications within the library, and I need to think about how to maximize the impact of our developer time. And when we add a new application, we need to think about it as part of our overall ecosystem. What care and feeding will it take in terms of security, accessibility, general maintenance, who will be creating the content for that application. And all of this can really add up. For some of our applications, have managed to generate technical debt at an astounding rate for us, and have really impacted our capacity to take on other work for the library. So when we migrated our main site to Wagtail, it was July of 2016, so almost exactly 8 years ago now. And last night I was looking over our comparison spreadsheet as we decided what CMS to go to. And we looked at, of course, Drupal and WordPress, also Concrete 5, ModX, Expression Engine. And I won't say which one our lead developer said almost made him throw up. But we really liked the flexibility and extensibility of Wagtail. We knew our users, our authors were going to ask us to change the templates, to modify and adapt the templates for different purposes. And we really liked that we could use Wagtail for that, pretty much as it was without accruing a lot of extra debt to maintain those different templates. We were able to make much of our site a lot more data-driven after that migration, and created page types for our staff, for collections, exhibits, our library spaces. and to create snippets for academic subjects and disciplines to provide through lines through our content. So we're currently looking at our first major migration since then, 8 years later. And in that intervening 8 years, we've swapped out a ton of stuff from our overall technology and kind of productivity stack. We're using a different authentication platform, different prototyping tools, project management tools, and so on. But we really have no serious thoughts about migrating away from Wagtail at this point. It's hard to know when you're assessing it what the sustainability of that is going to be and what kind of footprint it's going to take. And sometimes that's really only visible in hindsight. But now that we have those 8 years of hindsight, it's a really good feeling to go into this redesign, knowing that our CMS has this history of sustainability. So I want to thank Torchbox and the Wagtail developers. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Next up, we have Eric. Okay. So all you have to do is plug in. Should give you subjects. Okay. So you can join the Zoom and things. So yeah, just share screen. Slides.
Spoilers.
Excellent. Welcome, Eric, about Pages of Our Lives, a moving Wagtail story.
Okay. Think about this setup a little. So I'm going to talk while I pull up my gist that I just closed. I just was inspired to do this talk, just kind of talking to other people here, and just kind of I think I was inspired by Tom's talk too about like making Wagtail more accessible for new folks, and I feel like there's also this sort of like mid-level rubber meets the road like tasks that all of us who are familiar with Wagtail end up having to do on a project sooner or later, my inspiration here was from the old soap opera Days of Our Lives. I think we've all been through a lot of dramatic situations, like Sands Through the Hourglass or the Pages of Our Lives. And in this story, for where I work, we needed to make some changes to our information architecture. We actually had like a completely flat page structure. And so there's this discussion around improving site navigation. And we realized, having some sort of hierarchy would be good. And so at some point in that project, I was given this spreadsheet that our product team had created. And, this is kind of the part that we're pretty sure we won't be replaced by AI yet, which is like turn this into something that will be on the website. So in the process of drilling that down, when you have a lot of different pages on the website, you kind of need to like figure out what structure to put that into. I eventually created a very similar spreadsheet kind of based off of this. This is a series of columns that extend, kind of basically categorizing all the cases where we wanted to both move a page, but also change the page title, but maybe update the page slug. That was for our case, it was about like 80 or 90 pages. So it's, just in the threshold of that classic SKCD comic about like, do you write something to automate this yourself? How long will that take? I, of course, decided to write something to automate it myself because that is why I became a programmer. I like to do stuff that seems boring and tedious really rapidly and at scale. And so I kind of came up with this structure as both a way of like checking the work and the plan that we were trying to do. But once I had done this, I started thinking like, okay, like I know other people in the Wagtail community have probably done this before. We've all wanted to move a bunch of pages before, and in fact, I started looking around. Anytime you have a use case that you feel like other people might have done before, there might be previous solutions. And I found something in the Wagtail code base that I think is about as old as Wagtail itself, written by old gas man, and is documented to bulk move pages. This is a beautiful function. I love it so much. It's like 30 lines of code. But unfortunately, it's a bit limited in that, for one, it relies on page IDs, which, we have multiple different environments that we're on. The page IDs might be different, and the page slug is kind of what everybody knows. So I eventually wrote a command that is, not too crazy, not too huge, but I just love the fact that the doc string itself is longer than the function that Matt wrote. And I've I have the gist as well, but I'm not sure I have much time to talk through it in detail. But in general, the kind of workflow that I came up with is, I think, something that we've had to do a lot. And, one of my questions is kind of especially after the packages talk, is where does something like this exist, where clearly I've made opinions about the names of these columns that someone else might disagree with. Do I want to write code to make that dynamic? Probably not. But, the general idea here is you have current and new and previous stuff. At some point, one of my coworkers asked the ability to undo changes if you wanted to do, if you regretted the changes that you made. So I wrote some code that adds the new columns that can then be read from to undo your changes and play them backwards, which that was a fun little bit of thing that I don't think any of us have used yet. And I don't, Vince, how much time do I have left? 30 seconds. Okay, see, that's what I thought. Yeah, so kind of my question, I'm happy to talk to people. This is not the only management command I've run in our code base to ostensibly save us time. And there is kind of this middle ground of I'm not sure when something like this could be generalized a little bit more to be used by other people, or whether it's a strategy that is useful to share on the blog, or whether it can be packaged, with a little bit of help from others, something that might belong in Wagtail core as a feature of hey, you want to, you're migrating content. I think all of us who work in this industry know that we do that often. And so there's probably ways that could be shared, but feel free to talk to me about it if you're curious.
Thank you, Eric. Next up, we have Chuck.
Yes. All right. So this talk is called Lost and Found in Translation, or the Babelfish is Impossible. I hope you know what the Babelfish is, because I didn't have to include that explanation in this time. But it'll become clear enough from context, I think. Back in October 2015, my wife and I honeymooned in Cancun, and what we did was nothing. This was by choice. We did a do stuff honeymoon vacation in 2016. During some of the nothing that we were doing, we actually rewatched the first season of Arrested Development on my laptop. I should mention that as of 2015, it was still pretty funny, but even at that point had not aged especially well. So keep that in mind. But anyway, we watched it on Netflix. Weird thing about Netflix, at least circa 2015, is that it hard enforces language based on your geographical location. So because we were in Cancun, we only had two options. We had to either watch dubbed in Spanish or in English with Spanish subtitles. We speak English, so we chose the latter. For those who don't know, in season one, there's a recurring joke that involves two characters who are brothers and don't understand what the word hermano means in Spanish. It means brother. So they spend a lot of time trying to discover the identity of this secret man, not realizing that it is one of them that is being talked about. Now, these two they speak English, and also they're not smart. So if you are a Spanish-speaking viewer watching this, I think you have enough pieces to gather it from context. But if you are just reading the Spanish subtitles, the Spanish text, there's no joke here. The joke is obliterated in the pursuit of an extremely literal translation. Now, if you wanted to convey the intent of the joke, which is a misunderstanding, you probably need to omit the word hermano entirely and come up with a different word that works as a play on translation in the other direction. Alternatively, you could keep the original and just add a lot of explanation as to why it's a joke, which would work about as well as explaining a joke ever works. Which is to say, it might make sense, but it's not going to be funny. A translation of both meaning and intent here is basically impossible. It's not going to be one-to-one. You lose something even if it's just the laugh. I was going to talk next about Beowulf, which I'm sure everybody read at some point, and the ways its very first word has been translated over the years, including the very fun choices in the 2021 translation by Marina Devana Headley. But in the interest of time, I'm going to take a cue from Yabashige here and skip all that nonsense. We're going to talk instead about Shogun, which is an FX show from earlier this year that is an adaptation of a novel set in 1600s Japan. One of Shogun's main characters is John Blackthorne. He's an English Protestant, and he's a ship's pilot who's been stranded in Japan, where he earns the nickname Anjin, which is the Japanese word for pilot. Blackthorne interacts with some of the power players in Japan's ruling class during a time of political upheaval, but he does not speak Japanese. He didn't even know the culture existed until he crashed here. His eventual official translator on the show is Mariko, who is fluent in Portuguese thanks to her training by Catholic monks. Interestingly, there's a bit of double translation the show is doing here that you might not notice if you're not paying attention, which is that when Blackthorne is speaking and being translated into Japanese, we hear English, but he's actually speaking Portuguese because that's the language that Mariko then knows to translate into Japanese, which we then see translated using subtitles. Now, if you recognize this screenshot without having seen much of the show Shogun, that's probably because Mariko notoriously almost never translates what Blackthorne is actually saying, and to the point that it generated a whole series of memes as the show was airing. The joke of these usually revolves around Blackthorne spitting out a bunch of rambling, angry bluster and Mariko cutting right to the point of what it is he's trying to say. What I love about this is that Shogun and these memes is actually perfectly capturing a crucial aspect of translation, which is that literal meaning is always secondary to intended meaning, connotation, and cultural context. Like if you think about this, first of all, Japanese is so fundamentally different as a language from English or Portuguese that a one-to-one translation is essentially impossible. On top of that, Mariko is translating a foreigner who has no grasp on feudal Japan's customs, traditions, or niceties, and she's doing so for Japanese nobles and lords who, against whom offense could mean death. Consider also that even if the lords and masters don't speak the language that Blackthorne is speaking, they can see him. They can hear his tone of voice, they can see his anger or his impatience, and they can hear how long he's taking to talk compared with what Mariko says to them as what he said. Her translation achieves the practical purpose of communication, but conveys a lot more by disregarding fidelity to original word choice or syntax. And this is what translation actually always is. It's not the Babelfish. It is not a machine-like input-output process that reproduces identical statements in any language. That's impossible. Translation is the distillation and interpretation into a new context for new audiences. Translation adds meaning to the original text, often necessarily, in order for the translation to have value to its recipient. Translation always loses something from the original too, whether that's grammatical nuance or poetic character or political context or general shrimp-based grumpiness. This is true whether you're translating a website full of financial terms and data, whether you're trying to read a menu in Eastern Europe, or whether you're debating the merits of subs versus dubs for your favorite Japanese anime. It's true everywhere because it is fundamental to what language is and what translation is and how they work. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you, Chuck. All right. Next up, we have Tim.
I'm gonna try to break
Another he's gonna be breaking records.
Hello, thank you, goodbye.
If you happen to get time.
All right, so as a lot of you know, I'm here from Philadelphia. I love Philly, and when you come to Philly, you might think of this, or this, or this. And today we took a little bit of a deeper dive. And since people might be here for the next couple of days, I wanted to show you a couple small things you can do around Philly that you don't see on TV. So today we saw ENIAC, some of us, and some of us saw the Sphinx that's over in the library over there. But there's more you can do around Philly. So if you're here today, tomorrow, and want to take a break, you can go check out Giovanni's Room, which is the first LGBTQIA+ bookstore in the country, probably in the world. It's down at 12th and Pine in our lovely neighborhood. And there are a lot of good ice cream places down there too, and a wonderful antique row. It's also where my friends Dan and Neil met and eventually got married. Philly was also where Mother's Day was founded, and you can see the spot where it was founded right there. There's also the Motor Museum, which is a wonderful museum at 22nd and Market that was started by medical physicians many, many years ago. So you can see all kinds of wonderfully grotesque things there. There's this lovely set of steps up the wall in Manayunk that you can go visit, which is absolutely beautiful. There's a shoe museum. So if you're really into shoes, you can check out the history of shoes. There's also the lovely Shafusu Japanese tea house, not far from here, across in Belmont. So if you want to role play some Shogun, for example, you could just roll over there and go for it. I don't know if Lady Mariko is going to be in town, unfortunately. There is also Philadelphia Magic Gardens down on South Street. This is down at 10th and South, which is a mammoth piece of immersive artwork, which was all done with found materials such as tiles, broken mirrors, and put together. It's an absolutely beautiful spot. One of the most selfied spots in Philadelphia is their tunnels and all kinds of different things you can check out. And then there's one of my favorites, the Insomnia Cookie Lab. So Insomnia Cookies was started right here on Penn's campus by a brilliant Wharton student who decided it might be possible to sell cookies to stoned college students late at night. So over here in Houston Hall, right on the other side of Houston College Hall, the first Insomnia Cookies was open. And his plan was, I'm going to sell cookies from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. to stoned college kids. And guess what? It took off. There are like 250 Insomnia Cookies chains worldwide. But there is only one cookie lab, and it is here in South Philly, right by those cheesesteak places, which I glossed over back on this tab, I think. So the cookie lab is right across from Pat's Steaks, but it's much, much more impressive. So if you walk in, it looks just like a normal Insomnia Cookies. It's got this wonderful like front counter, just like all the others, but then there's a bookshelf to the side. And if you say the secret password, the bookshelf swings out of the way, revealing a speakeasy-like hallway back to the cookie lab, where you can make custom cookies with any kind of topping you want, and also all kinds of crazy milkshakes. So here's an example of some of the cookies you can make and what it looks like. And that is garnish of an ice cream sandwich on top of an ice cream sundae. The sundaes have a minimum of 2,000 calories each. And as you can see here, some of the garnishes get quite insane. So that is a 5-inch wide cookie in the middle, a piece of pie, and an ice cream sandwich, all used as garnish. So there's a ton of wonderfully wild and weird stuff you can do while you're here in Philly. Go beneath the surface. So if you're here for another day or two, go find some weird stuff and do it, because it's a really fun town. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Gotta check out the Cookie Lab. Next up, we have Megan on Quirks of QWERTY. Alrighty.
All right, folks. So probably about like roughly like a week before PyCon, I started to notice that I have a long-term shoulder injury. I've always needed like special ergonomic equipment. I've used one of those kind of split keyboards forever with the tenting and things like that. But it was one of those situations where it wasn't enough anymore. And I knew in my gut that I was on my way to like an injury and RSI and all that fun stuff. And, which is not the thing you needed when you're organizing a conference or preparing for PyCon. But fortunately, I have this community. I have friends who have been through this before. And, you know, immediately, like, folks are like, we'll bring our keyboards to PyCon for you to play with. You know, Kojo brought a mechanical keyboard tester for me to try some things out. And also, fortunately, because we have so many nerds that have solved these problems already, I discovered this great website on the internet called Carpal X, where they have actually done all the work of like calculating what is the most optimal keyboard layout in the world, pretty much. But in this like exploration, I've discovered that QWERTY is so weird and bizarre. It was invented in 1868. And like, there's this great Smithsonian article about like the apocryphal story is that, you know, QWERTY was designed to create like stop clashes between the type bars on the keyboard. That is not true. It turns out that the reason we have QWERTY today is it was a design decision when they decided that they were going to like mass produce the machines. And that decision was made by none other than Remington. Yes, folks, we have a gun manufacturer to thank for the QWERTY layout. You know, and for folks who are not from the United States, the Remington rifle is something that is a big part of our history, like both fortunate and unfortunate. And so that is pretty much how QWERTY came to be, and it has just stuck ever since, even though it doesn't make all that much sense. Like if you dig into some of the stats that Carpal X has and how they've measured things, like in terms of like the effort and like how you have to move your hands across the keyboard, QWERTY is actually pretty bad compared to some of the other layouts that exist, like Dvorak, or the one that I'm looking to transition to is called Colmac, because they actually do have paths to transition from QWERTY to layout like Colmac. But like digging into this was just so much fun because you can find like just some really weird layouts. Like the most effective one is actually this QWERTY. I don't even know how to pronounce the layout. And you know, like there's also, they did the opposite measurement. Let me find that one. The most difficult, this is typing hell, basically. The most difficult layout is TNWMLC. So if you really want to punish yourself, you can reformat your layout that way. It's just absolutely like, you know, even though I was like looking to solve for pain, it was very gratifying to kind of discover all these different things. Oh, come on, Zoom. Come on. Gotta love it when the controls cover up your last tab. But I'll just go ahead and put a shout out for this one, and also for the company that has created, honestly, the keyboard that saved my ability to work on this convention. It's called The Voyager by ZSA, and they also provided a really excellent article about how to transition to Colmac from QWERTY. And so definitely consider that for the long term, especially if you're like me and do a lot of programming and writing. And that's what I gotta say. Blame Remington.
Thank you, Megan. Love me a good keyboard. Next we have Michael Triton. On no, you can't change the color. What you want is wrong. That's what I want to tell every user out. How do I? Okay, so the way this works is, are you on this Zoom? Yeah, I gotta join this. Okay, so it's in the Slack. There's it's kind of weird how it works. There's a should be a US channel, space channel. Yep. Or it was.
Sorry, folks, I should know better at this point.
It was, let me go back to the channel. It's right there at the top. Oh, it scrolled away.
How do we get it to come back?
That's a good question.
Zoom.
There you go.
All right.
So, all right, you're already plugged in. That's your other screen.
Don't
So,
want audio.
No. But you can just mute it. Okay, and now share screen, and you're going to share your second screen right there. Desktop too.
I think I'm doing Figmas. It's different.
Okay, so you can share this one too. Just yeah, there you go. And the audio will come through the mic here. Or you can,
Okay. All right. So as my talk yesterday, I was talking about working with content creators and some other requests and flexibility and things like that. And one of the things that pops up all the time is no matter how flexible I make a system is, I want to change this one thing in this one little way. And I know it's not great. I know it's not perfect, but let me do it. And I always have to say no. And over the years, I've had to learn how to be very polite and find compromises. So this is a little bit of that. So this is a pretty typical heading field, a little bit more flexibility than you would imagine. This is a perfect place where someone's going to like, I want it to be green or whatever else. They're usually asking for this, which is insane because it's not configured with their Python library. If they are nerdy, they'll ask me for the first one. If they see I'm using Tailwind, they'll ask for the second one. I always say no, and I give a list of reasons. There's brand considerations. You can't inject green into your layout for some odd reason just because you like green. Green's not in your palette. There's accessibility considerations, which I'll show in a minute. Colors matter. If you're colorblind, you can't read and see certain things. There's UX considerations. Having a bunch of different colors that are mixed matched and inconsistency all throughout your site injects some distrust. Layout feels off, feels janky, feels like no one's taking care of anything. It's always separation of concern. Wagtail is really good about forcing you into a well-structured document, or tries to at the very least. And as soon as you start polluting your content with too much design, you can't export it as well, you can't migrate, you can't move into the future with any kind of confidence. And then also, once you start putting weird colors in the system, someone's got to support them. We have to make sure that your weird green works in other weird places. So this comes up a lot because everybody thinks that they're a designer. Everybody has an opinion on design. It's really easy to look at something and be like, well, if it was just like this, or Sally or Bob or somebody has this big campaign for their kid for some odd reason, we got to put it on the website. I know about color. I decorated something one time back in college. Very quickly put this into your browser. This is the color palette I'm going to be using. Obviously, I don't do that, but we're going to do a quick example with this color palette. It's off of coolers.co, I think is the name. I don't know how to say that. It's one of the more popular ones. So if you were ever trying to get a project off the ground, you need a bunch of palettes, you can grab one of those. Imagine you have this this section. This is applying that color palette. You can see that in these two situations, it's not that bad. Looks pretty good. On brand, your designer probably signed off on this. A few more colors. These still look good. Want a little bit of contrast. Oh no, guess what? We're not accessible. This hurts my eyes. I now want to die. I want to leave this website. This is somebody going in and just mucking with a few colors. Now, these colors are valid. They're in the palette. We've just combined them in a really dumb way. Now we have an accessibility problem. We've angered somebody. So how do you fix this? We've had a lot of luck with section level theming. So don't allow buttons and text and little things to be modified. Allow the section, like you just saw, to be changed. I have a little quick demo that I'm going to show over on CodePen. All right, so here are those themes recreated. You can see they're all here. I am using CSS variables, kind of old technology at this point in time. I have my palette defined at the top. I have my ribbon, which is what I'm calling that block. I'm taking in a theme color, and I'm taking a background color and a text color. And you can see that I'm applying that here. And then further down, I use that in a few places. My input's also picking that up. My buttons are picking that up. And then I can go through and apply some different CSS. So each one of these blocks is something like class ribbon, and then it's class, theme dash dark red, theme red, whatever, all the way down the line. This used to be really hard to do until we got CSS variables. This system seems to work for a lot of people because it's just enough customization. They know that they can choose some colors, but the colors have been vetted, the combinations have been vetted, it's already in brand, the designer's made a decision. I always start with this whenever I'm doing theming, and then I see where the problems are. If somebody's coming in and saying, I really need this red block, but I need bright pink or something weird. Then I can point back, like, we have a system, we agreed to this. Let's not fight it. Let's figure out why you want pink or yellow or whatever else. But you can get really far with a little bit of CSS. Again, this used to be just a ton of template logic back in the day. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Michael.
How can I make it readable? How can I make the logo bigger? Yeah.
So, so since we have 4 minutes left until we get kicked out, I will do my lightning talk super quick. And the only reason I'm thought of this yesterday is because let's see here, because I got a lot of questions about this after my talk, so I'm just gonna do a quick thing about how to stop spam in your Django app. And I will post these slides later so that you can grab the code out of them. So let me share this. Yeah. Okay, so stopping spam. Stopping bots is really easy. You can use Google reCAPTCHA. You can use CAPTCHAs. You know, there's open source stuff. That's not too terrible. Stopping humans is really hard. So how do we, this is some methods that we use to stop humans. The first one was blocking disposable emails. This is a package on PyPI called disposable email domains. That basically gives you a, you know, like @mailcatch.com, those types of things. And to integrate this, you can do it into a Django form pretty easily. And by just cleaning the form and checking data.split, and make sure you split on the last @ sign, because a valid RFC email can actually have multiple @ signs. So fun fact for you, anyone who's ever had to deal with that regex. So, okay, you block your disposable email addresses, but they're still getting through because they can just generate 1,000 outlook.com email addresses or Yahoo ones. So you still have a problem. Okay, so let's start by blocking IP addresses. So maybe my Wagtail admin only needs to be accessible in the US. I have like 3 users who are logging in. I don't need international access. I'm just gonna block that. Well, you can use the free GeoLite 2 database, which is, you used to be able to install it on Linux, like apt-get install GeoDB or something like that. But you can download it for free off their website. It's just a file. And with a little bit of Python code, you can essentially read that file and get the IP address. So this is, I'll post this later so you can grab it. But basically, you look up that IP address and it gives you a country. So you could say, if the country is not in US or Canada, then just don't even let them through. So, okay. But now the spammers have started using VPNs and DigitalOcean machines and proxies to get around your geolocation. So please just make it stop. So we're gonna go for the nuclear option here. And this is the thing that I shouted out in my talk yesterday, which is MaxMind's min fraud web service. So this is an API, it's pretty cheap. It's like a fraction of a cent per request. So maybe for PyPI, that would add up a lot for their spam problem, but maybe they can afford it, I don't know. So hopefully they could. So basically what you do is you just create a dictionary. They do have a Python package, so you can create a dictionary and you want to pass in as much context as you can. So like the IP address, the language from their browser, the user agent from their browser, and then their name, their phone number, their email. This supports like 100 or 200 data points, so you can just pass in as much data as you have. It works shockingly well. So over on the right column, you can see it basically gives you a score, and you can say if the score is greater than a certain threshold, they're probably most likely a spammer, and you can just not let them through. So after we implemented this, the number of spams that we had just went way down. So stopping humans is very hard, but it can be done with a couple quick and easy Python methods. So I just wanted to share that with you all. Thank you. So, all right, that's it. Thanks everyone for coming to Wagtail Space 2024 USA edition.